Welcome to the Garage. I'm Scott Lenihan.
And I'm Joe Ubel.
Today's discussion is, the impetus. You and I have had a lot of conversations going on lately.
Mm-hmm.
And then yesterday I got a email from one of our professed longtime listeners, Julie. And the topic would be elderly parents and kind of that lifestyle switch. We've got, we kind of broke it into two categories where we've got an estate
Mm-hmm.
where parents may have passed.
Yep.
And then we've got probably a more common one that we're running to in the marketplace, which is aging parents
Mm-hmm.
that have to make kind of a lifestyle choice.
But they're still in control.
Not always, but yeah, I think
Yeah.
the discussion we had was that that spectrum.
Yeah.
Where are they on the spectrum? And I think what we'll do is we'll lead into kind of that scenario first.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to just kind of what this is not, and this is not that time where the retirees is fully in control of their situation, and they know exactly what's going on, and they know where they're going. I think this is more geared towards mom,
The
dad.
spry retiree is not part of the discussion.
Yeah. But the mom, dad, grandma, grandpa situation where you're seeing that they might need a little extra help, they might need a little extra of support in their lives.
So let's go down that avenue first,
Yeah.
because in our discussion, there were breaking that category, because there's a spectrum there, the aging parent, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we have, there starts to be some tells.
Yep.
Right? The maintenance portion,
Yeah.
right? You show up and they're starting to need a little more help.
Like you're talking kids, the kids of the
Yeah.
parents, they
There's
come in.
support.
Yeah, they're coming in, they're helping mom with a few extra things.
The screen door all of a sudden doesn't work right, and that's on the list along with maybe a leaking or dripping sink, and it starts to become kind of overwhelming. And I see that as the tell that we should be looking for with some of our parents,
Mm-hmm.
that it's starting to be a little much.
Right.
And there was another tell in there that we had talked about. I don't remember what it was, but the idea that the parents, it might start to be time to have a discussion.
Yeah, and it isn't about taking away your parents' control of the situation, which is why I mentioned it that way. We want them to have every control, but we also want to make their lives a little bit easier by making the right decisions at the time when they're able to make those decisions. Because what I think you're going to try to say is we ran into enough times before where we're later in that decision process, and they have less control, and they have less control of where they're going, what they're doing with they're going.
And they feel a lot more helpless.
Yes.
And they feel like they're relying a lot more on their kids.
Yep.
More so than maybe even they're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the pre-discussion that we had, that avenue, there's different avenues to go down. There might be a townhome type scenario.
Yep.
Where it is a lot more independent.
Yep.
They can still do their gardening without worrying about the yard. Maybe they got their flower pots and an outside garden, but they're not worried about the yard. They're not worried about the snow. I mean, I was emotionally done with snow this winter.
I think we all already know.
Yeah, but I mean, it takes some of the onus off them for some of those things, and they're able to focus more on the social part, maybe, if they're still very social.
Yeah.
So that's early on in the process for some of those parents. And it's a common one, just that lifestyle switch where they move into a townhome, they maybe have a second home somewhere else that they're going off to in the off season.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that's the person that this discussion is focused on.
No, I think this discussion is more focused on the person that's starting to get overwhelmed by the process of owning a single family house mostly. When I would probably gear this towards, maybe a townhome, but more towards that geared towards a single family house that you're starting to realize that the house is too big for them. Starting to realize that the maintenance of it is too hard for them, and that maybe a transition to something that is easier living for them will help them thrive. And which is that more important for me and more for you as well, is you want your parents, your grandparents, to be happy and thrive, to just be able to not worry about the focal point of life is their house maintenance.
It was funny in the pre-discussion. There were several examples that
Yes.
popped up. You and I personally, just within the last year or two, where we sat there and they waited too long.
Yeah.
So the maintenance had been deferred on the house. They were getting overwhelmed. I think the kids maybe weren't coming around.
Or
as
listen,
much.
I had a couple of situations where it was one spouse was more geared towards maintenance in the house and in the lawn and the snow, and then the other one, they pass away, unfortunately, and then leaves those maintenance issues to the other spouse,
Sure.
and then that spouse starts to get to go down a rabbit hole of being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of the situations I've run into.
Yeah. So, because there's always the adage by the old guy house, right? The one
Yeah.
that was retired.
Yeah.
That the maintenance was always like
Yeah.
they were looking.
He
for
did the
stuff to
windows,
do.
he did the furnace.
They had the screws up in the rafter in the little mason
Oh,
jars,
I
right?
love
All
that.
sorted out by.
Genius.
But there's a point where maybe that spouse passes.
Yep. Or it's on the opposite spouse too.
Yeah.
I had a situation where she was doing all the maintenance,
Yeah.
and he was overwhelmed by the maintenance afterwards.
Yeah. Oh,
It goes both ways, but
Yeah.
it's just the adage that
Yeah.
one spouse is doing more of one of the things, and it comes as overwhelming.
But I think it's a story that we see a lot.
Yep.
And, we had brought up, just to put the exclamation mark on it, there were a couple examples that we brought up where there was a bit of a rejuvenation, right?
Yeah.
The seller found themselves, they were in home, maybe they had a friend that still stopped over, but it was mostly the kids, and moving them from that scenario, that single family scenario, into I think one was a rental and one was assisted living,
apartment. Yeah.
where all of a sudden there was a social circle again,
Yep.
a reason to step out the front door and go to a Monday social.
Yep.
And to see, we transitioned them and then worked on selling the house, to see the personality lift, where all of a sudden they had things to do, right?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't as difficult to leave the house to find those things.
They had a reason to leave the
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to drive,
Right.
because for some,
That's a big thing.
that's a big thing too.
Yeah.
Um,
But what this discussion is a lot having to do with that. Okay, so now you've decided that my house is overwhelming.
Yeah.
Okay.
and they call you.
And they call you and they go, all right, Joe, Scott, what do I start?
Where do we start? Yeah.
Like I'm overwhelmed already by even having you in my house.
Yeah.
And so, what's the first step?
Well, that phone call first and foremost,
Yeah.
but establishing kind of like I'm working on one right now. Where do I go, right? So establishing those options, some of the resources. Is it assisted living? Is it rental? Because right now, I could just top my head one example. It's a matter of cost certainty. She's currently in a condo. HOA fees are going off the charts. Couple special assessments. She's on a fixed income. I mean, it hurts.
Yeah.
Right? So in that particular example, she's moving into a rental, so she's still very independent, but something where there's more cost certainty.
Yep.
And then she's able to utilize her asset, some of her equity, to just all of a sudden extend.
Yeah.
You know. But the phone call, and then establishing where we're at. Like, do we need help with, it could be 30, 40 years of stuff. What do we do with the stuff, right?
Yeah.
Some of those resources. Storage, because there's things people don't want to let go of. What are some storage resources? What do you really want to keep? I find on most of those, they're storing things, and then you follow up 5-6 years later, they're not going to the storage anymore.
That's pretty common.
But it's a matter of letting that stuff go, right? You can't emotionally let it go, and it's a very emotional process.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of times, kids to do that on their own, or for a parent that feels alone, or maybe they don't have that resource group to be doing it on their own, to be able to help someone shoulder that.
Right, and isn't that part of
That's your value.
That's the value of an agent coming in like us, coming in and having that discussion with them of, okay, what about your stuff? What about where you're going? What can we do to help? What resources do you need? Do you need help moving that stuff? Okay, we have a mover. All right, do you need someone that can help organize your stuff, help you transition to the next place in more of an organized manner? Do you need help selling your stuff? Do you need estate sales? Do you need someone to help you with garage sale stuff? Those things like that are resources that we can provide and shoulder that burden that you feel overwhelmed by.
At least have some avenues for choices, right?
Yeah. Obviously, the seller is making all decisions on this, but what you're giving them is options. And you're giving them, okay, here's how we're going to get to the finish line, which the finish line for them is to transition into that situation that's going to help them thrive. Okay? And they're taking this asset that they have and try to maximize the value on it. We're going to provide them with as many tools as possible, whether it's, those resources to donate things to,
Yeah.
to come pick things up.
Well, and I think that goes back to, I think, one of our just recent episodes too, the value of, if there is deferred maintenance, what do we do to maximize our value? What do we spend money on? If we need to spend money, what do we spend it on? And then if we're spending $5,000, are we getting a 10 grand return?
Yep.
20 grand return?
Yep.
Right? One I'm working on right now, I know we'll have a discussion about it at the end, but the We Buy Ugly Houses comes in, offers, it's a small condo in Edina, offers 80 grand, and the seller seriously thought about it.
Mm-hmm. Because they're overwhelmed with the situation.
Well, yeah, they told them, hey, we'll write you a check, you can just grab what you want and leave.
Yeah.
At this point, we've got $7,000 worth of investment, and we're going on at 145 here in another couple weeks. There wasn't a lot to do.
Right.
It was getting a carpet guy in, getting a paint guy in. Ultimately, we had to get a tile guy in too.
Mm-hmm.
But we were spending the money in the right spots to get the return.
That's why you have
So-
discussions, because you want to make sure you're spending the right money. Okay, you're organizing where your life's at the time, whether it's maintenance of things or organization of the buyers that are coming in, but making your house show ready. But as those transition situations, you want to make sure the house is ready, but also giving them a place to put their stuff, get a reputation to put.
I think it goes back to the relationship's different.
Mm-hmm.
Like that company coming in doing the write the check and go. They owe you no fiduciary duties. They have no agency type relationship with you, right? They're built on a margin. They're coming in representing themselves.
So
right?
are we getting this conversation now?
I guess so. I think it's a good one. I'm sorry, Joe. Because of that example, it's a prime current example of, as an agent, I come in and, I have certain responsibilities to you: loyalty, obedience, reasonable care, accounting, confidentiality.
Mm-hmm.
I need to look out for your best interest.
Best interest, right? That's one thing you should to take away from this conversation right now is we have your best interest in mind when we sit down with you.
From a commerce standpoint,
From a commerce
my
standpoint. My license
is based off of
that.
those 7 fiduciary duties.
That's right.
So when I come in, the idea is that I need to help you make decisions, help you see the course of decisions that are available to you.
Yep.
That you make the ones that are right for you.
Yes.
Right? And that they could be different for everybody. But with that scenario that I outlined with, and I don't know the name of the company, but it was similar to the write a check, cash buy, guaranteed
Well,
sale.
like I said, you're seeing those billboards everywhere these days, and their advertisements are everywhere. Is buy your house by cash.
And
by cash.
They serve their purpose
They're legitimate businesses, and they will absolutely be a real asset to someone.
to someone. And
But-
I think, yeah, go
But
ahead.
I was just gonna say is they have their business model, and they have their margins, they have to fit. So if you think about what they're doing, if you take the asset that you have and you have through your family, and they market it as a value of this at this time, and then they're going to knock off 30-40% and say, I'm going to offer you this. And they're going to say, all right, well, I'm offering you 120 on your 200,000 house.
Well, I just think you don't have perspective. You have no one there validating your interest. I think it's built on convenience, right? I mean, let's
Absolutely.
face it, being able to just grab a check,
Walk away.
walk away, maybe in this particular example, that extra 60 grand doesn't mean anything to you.
Well,
Right.
maybe it's a situation where that kids are out of state, out of country, and they're overwhelmed by having to come back and spend time, and this is a convenient situation. Those things like that work out well for those people.
So I think the agent value on just the array of decisions is it's valuable to have someone in your corner, right? And that just turned into more of an agent deal. I think, Joe, the aged parent is a common one that we're seeing more and more.
Well, baby boomers are getting older.
Yeah.
Our parents are getting older, and we see this with just our generation, is watching our parents age. Is we're going to see this more and more as and I want to make sure that this is a situation that we watch out for elder abuse. There's a lot of elder abuse in this industry.
There's potential for it.
Yeah, that takes advantage of the situation. Well, and again, our fiduciary duties are to make sure that decision making is on par with what they should be doing.
And I think most times there's a support structure there, but not always.
I've ran into enough already that I feel like I was made decisions with them, and they didn't have anyone else in their ear.
Well, and I think a lot of times it falls on, clearly on the kids. And the kids they're in the grind too.
They're
Right.
doing what we're doing right now. They're working their way
Raising
through their
kids, they're working, and all of a sudden the needs of the parent become more and more.
The forefront of their life now, and now we realize they need a little more help.
Yeah, instead of phone calls, you're stopping over,
Mhm.
right? So, with that in mind, I didn't want it to. I don't think we need to delve too much in there. I think it's just good to have, as an agent, it's becoming more and more common. So I think it's important for the listener to understand they're not alone.
Right.
Um,
Very important to know.
yeah,
Like, as an agent, I know we this is our business. We make money off selling houses, but we also I've made great contacts with great older people that loved conversations we have, because we sit down and talk about everything, and they view me as part of their life at the time.
yes.
And it's amazing the care that they care for you during that period of time, because you
It's
help
almost
them.
embarrassing.
Yes.
Yes.
It's it's honestly one of the best phone calls you can make to them, is just check on them, see how they're doing,
Yeah.
and they love that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is what we get, and we shouldn't be. I don't want it to be afraid to make the phone calls, and make those calls to someone like us, because then we can help them with the process, make the decisions with their family, make the right moves that they can be in control, and help them from A to B. Whether it's finding the right assets, be able to move their stuff over, kind of pare down what they have, and move into that 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom place, and then they can thrive and not have to worry about the maintenance.
I think that's the last point on this section for me is those times where they finally make that transition. They've got their check on the sale of their what was their family home. Is that they've usually made the transition and the closing comes later, is when you look at them and you can see the change and they go, I wish I'd have done this sooner.
Yeah.
That's the part that's a little sad for me.
Yeah.
Is that a couple more chapters in the book got turned before they made that decision, and you can see the change in them, but it was a change they had to make because it was too painful to stay in their current situation. And when they say, I wish I'd have made this change sooner, that's the part that you get a little bit of, you're
Well,
happy for them, but there's a
well
little
said.
bit of sadness.
But it's sometimes it takes a little bit of that extra push to get them over the top of that mountain.
Well,
And-
not feeling alone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but not just that, but like you think you're fine, you think you're fine, you think you're fine, and all of a sudden over the mountain you go and you're not fine.
Yeah.
And it happens quick, and you're not the only one to realize that. But if you can be on the forefront of that mountain before you have to make the decision,
Yeah.
you can make it on your own
I
terms.
decided one more exclamation mark too.
You're gonna put
Yeah,
more
well,
on-
to your part of the conversation, when they go into that, whether it's independent living or a condo or rental type situation, all of a sudden there's another support group there,
Yeah.
and that's the part that you don't. There's someone there checking on them because, you know, they're in Unit A or whatever it may be.
Your friends.
Someone there, new friends, new everything, and I think as a kid, you know, looking at a parent, just all of a sudden, you know, you're still getting phone calls, but they've got stuff to do. You're like, hey, what are you doing Wednesday? Oh, well, I got this or
That
this.
bridge.
Yeah, whatever, mahjong, right? Whatever it may be. I don't know what it is for 'em, but can we switch to the other side, which
Yeah.
is the estate portion?
Sure. So to kind of scale it back a little bit, so make sure we're on the same page. This is a situation where mom passes, grandma passes, sister passes, and you are the ones that are in responsibility of that person. Okay.
For the estate.
For the state. So the first process of that is you have a legal advice from your attorney that you're maybe the executor in your sister or your mom's will. Okay.
Yeah.
So
So,
then-
assuming there's a will. Yep.
Then you would go ahead and have to go through a probate situation with the courts, with the state. The state then identifies you as the person that's going to be the signer.
The executor.
Executor is a better way for it.
Yeah.
For the estate. So
Yeah.
then you can open up estate accounts, and you can sign for real estate contracts as one of them, for any checks written for them, to pay for bills, pay for any kind of services that is needed.
Yeah.
That's when that starts. Okay.
So regardless of whether there's a will or not a will, there's still a probate process.
That's my understanding.
Yes. It's my understanding too. So going through that court process, generally, I'd say on average it's about 2 months. Death certificate needs to be obtained. Get several copies of the death certificate because you'll be amazed at how many copies of that you need.
Right.
The other thing that is very frustrating for someone that gets assigned to as that executor is, especially with aging parents, it's amazing passwords to accounts, bank accounts, getting access to those. You know, if you have to wait to be assigned the executor, there could be 2 months there, 3 months, sorry, where there's bills still coming in.
Yeah.
Maybe there's still a mortgage on the property, at which point as agent you're contacting, you know, executors contacting the mortgage company, letting them know that ma or dad's passed. There's just a lot of communication.
It's still that time. You still have to pay that mortgage.
And sometimes they're understanding, not always.
Not always.
But you know, if there is access to the accounts, and that's a relationship type thing, right? But I'm always amazed where they run into that issue. They can't. The kids can't communicate on bills or accounts
until
they get that stuff squared up.
It takes a while for that process, and you know, if you were going to give it, you know, from someone passing to getting all said and done with, I bet it's like 90 days until they are prepared to be able to make asset decisions and has access to everything.
Yeah.
It's probably from passing to timelines by 90-ish days, I'd say.
Trusts still go through a probate process.
They do.
Yep. So, you know, there's different types of trust, the irrevocable trust, living trust. There's things like that. I think making sure you have an estate planner, especially if you're getting to that point prior to the estate, having those things kind of squared up is a good idea.
Yes. It also can be tax beneficial if those transitions are forced.
Yeah.
You know, do you have some kind of trust involved? That way, if you transition to any kind of certain care, and that's your only asset,
Yeah.
they can't come back your asset.
Yeah, so I mean, there's if you're fortunate enough to be able to do some of that estate planning, to have that, it might be a good time to kind of.
It's a great time. It's actually never a bad time to plan your estate. Really, because then you have at least have a game plan.
So let's talk about as an agent, you get called in on an estate.
Mm-hmm.
It's mom's property.
Mm-hmm.
You're the sibling that, because if there's 5 siblings or 2, someone gets pushed to the front as primary. Maybe they're the only one in town.
Yep.
But they usually end up being the executor for
Yep.
the estate.
Yep.
They call you, you go over there, and I'd say it's about 50-50, where they waited way too long.
Yep.
You know, now that's where I see those companies come in, because there might be 5 siblings, and that one sibling goes, hey, listen, I don't have time for this.
It's
Right.
a lot of families that say that.
So I think as an agent, when you come in, being able to present those resources,
Yeah.
because they still have to shoulder things,
Too.
but if you really want to try and protect some of that asset,
Mm-hmm.
as an agent, you should be bringing resources to the table.
And that's one of the biggest things that we have as agents is, you know, a set of people or companies that we trust, that we've worked with, that we've went through the process before with, that we get a chance to bring them in again and know what they're going to do, and know that you know they're going to provide this service and to Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, and we're going to be able to get them to the finish line.
Because there's different levels of service. There's straight up moving companies. There's others that come in, help pack up.
Yep. And they're help pack up and put things back together in certain ways. Like if you were moving to assisted living situation.
Oh, so we're off estate. We're back.
Well, I'm just kind of
Yeah.
touching on that a little bit. So like there's companies that will make perfect transitions from one place to the next place. So help you kind of find that.
Yes.
Back to the estate stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, but the estate portion, you know, there's different arrays of services that are available.
Yeah.
That some cost more than others. Some are charity type things where they'll come in, grab stuff.
Yeah, Salvation Army type thing like that.
Marketplace,
Bridging.
where, I mean, if you put free on anything, I'm amazed at the number of people who come and grab stuff, right? In the pre-discussion, I told you, as a challenge to my wife, I took a picture of the first generation TiVo and put free, and I said, someone wants this. And 3 days later, someone came and grabbed it.
I want that. It's free.
I don't know why they wanted it,
It's
but
free.
they wanted it.
It's
I
free.
don't- Yeah, so.
Well, someone's free. People want that.
So I think we're at 30 minutes.
But let's touch a little more about on the estate process. So you know, a lot of times what happens is you come in, you have to come up with a game plan of what's going to happen with what's going to fix what are you up for, just like you would any other property, right? A lot of times it's finding where the stuff's going to go. You know,
Yeah.
because a lot of times the house isn't cleaned out. Usually it's just the way grandma left it. You know, and it's just perfect in mint condition.
Yeah.
But you still need to find places for that stuff to go. So, you know, as an agent, we have those resources to help them, you know, find those places for those things to go. And I think that's important to be able to manage it, to organize it, and to help the resources to be able to get from A to B. And so coming into those listing appointments and sitting down with the estate and, you know, the siblings and, you know, whoever the executor is, and then come up with a game plan. All right, so this is what I have. What can we do? And then we can also talk about what repairs can be done to be able to be market ready. Because we talked before is we want your house to be ready for sale, and then the transition to being out of the property is not to be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to have houses full, then have 22 days to get out everything else.
I would say even call the agent and say, all right, as is, how much is this worth?
Right.
Right? What's the price opinion on what it's worth as is?
Yeah.
And then the agent should be able to give you a window that says, hey, with $10,000 of investment, here's the top or the near portion top portion of the value window. And then you can weigh out, do we do it, do we not do it, right?
And there's a lot of cases where it is absolutely not beneficial to do it, or it's overwhelming for the people, and that's okay. The only thing that we can provide is options. Options. You make decisions. We give you options, and we tell you this may be a benefit to you. You do the carpet here, you do the paint here, and you fix this, and you might get an extra $20,000.
Yeah.
And then not worth it.
Yeah.
I'm already burned out from this.
But at least they know, right?
And that's what we're here for, is to provide certain situations, and make them ready for it.
Yeah.
We give them options, and then
Well, not only, here's the other part. Let's say you go as is, and you and I turn back to your network of investors, right? And you go, hey, here's this property off market. Here's what the seller wants, right? Wants X. Leave whatever's left. Here's their price. And then you at least have 4, 5, 6, 7 investors
Yep.
that are taking a potential run at that property.
Right.
It's like calling in, and I'm not going to say their name again, but calling in 7 of those companies, right?
Yeah, and that's they're the same thing, the same protocol they provide. It's just different types of
But they're
assets.
usually investors that are tied to an agent that are waiting for situations like this coming up. And if you're able to play them against each other,
Again,
you might get you should get a better scenario.
right, and that's the thing too, is you have more control over it that way, and especially more control from our perspective. Whereas if you call in an investor directly from one of those advertisements that you might see, they are in it for themselves. They catch you at the right moment, and they're going to offer you X, and that X I know is probably going to be 30 to 40% under market value,
Which is
which is
a
fair.
certain margin.
Which is fair, but at the same time is if it's important to your family, it's important to you as individual to not lose that portion. That's where we come in. We provide those services to be able to bring that asset to as much value as possible to you can take it to the next family member or whatever situation it is.
Yeah.
We don't want to sell ourselves short. That's really important to have an agent, because they are looking out for your best interests.
They should be.
Yes.
I mean, they've got a
They got a huge
they got
for it.
responsibility. to
Right.
it. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I want to thank Julie for the recommendation, because this is something that we're right in the middle of right
Right,
now.
and we were actually having, we can tell her, we were having this discussion to do this prior to that note, so which is fantastic that she was on the same page with us.
Yeah, we had a meeting on Monday with a group that,
This is kind of what we're starting to see more of, and we want to be prepared for it.
yeah,
And this is something I think people need to hear, because you're not alone. Everyone, wherever transition you're in, especially if you're in that older stage of life, if you have someone they can reach out to and help you through this process, it won't be as overwhelming. And I think that's also the challenge. Whether it's an estate situation, which is also overwhelming, it's emotional, and it has a lot of different things with it.
yeah,
To the emotional side of your transition out of your 4-year house, and you've been there forever.
Yeah.
And it's time for you to move on, because it's overwhelming, but you need a little bit of hand holding.
well,
And it's okay.
it's time for another opportunity, for them, in where they have a little more control then, right? They maybe have a little more support around them. It frees them up to do the gardening on the patio,
But
right?
it simplifies
If the
life.
fridge breaks, they can call someone else if it's a rental scenario,
Mhm.
right? The plow, I wrote a strongly worded letter to the city of Woodbury. I was emotionally done with the snow,
So
Joe.
you yell at them.
I did. I took a picture.
Did
They pushed the snow into the
you
end of my
do
driveway.
it in all caps lock?
No, I didn't. But I did feel like a grumpy old man at the time. I was.
I knew that was going there. I was setting you up for it. I swung and I hit.
Yeah, you did. I was laughing at myself when I took a picture and then wrote the letter to the city works department. All right, I'm comfortable with this. I think it's a taste again of kind of what I think a lot more people are dealing with, and
yeah, just know, I guess, for our listeners, if you have someone in your life that has a little bit of at least some hand holding, don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to have discussions.
call
with
Joe
us,
or I.
and we can have you, have the right discussions. Like, if mom or dad's not there yet, we know that's not okay. But if you're like, okay, what can we do to kind of help her along, help him along? Because I feel like she's at that point when we're getting closer to needing something else. I would have that pre-discussion now, opposed to 2 years from now when it's now you're knees deep in something that needs to happen, like that's some kind of health condition that all of a sudden now it's I have to move.
Yeah. Well, I've had ones where they're racing to get it sold before a parent passes,
That's another
so
thing.
that they can avoid the probate and some of the other issues that pop up.
Then you have to cross fingers. That's a different story.
And that's sad too.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's about control.
Control.
So Joe, if someone wants to get a hold of you, Joe at tmetalstein.com.
Yep.
Scott at tmetalstein.com.
Yep.
I'd be happy to talk to you. I know you would be happy to talk to whomever. And at least again, I think it's a pretty common part of these discussions. Get a plan, right?
If you're organized and have something going forward, whether it's 2 years from now, at least you have a game plan for what your situation is.
2 months from now, whatever it may be.
Sometimes if you're ahead of the game, it will benefit you so much.
And then you got the parent that's pulling, and once my experience, once they let go, it always works out. If the timing's right, the timing's right. You see it, the parent doesn't always, and that's the part that becomes tough.
But sometimes that's why I was saying ahead of time, have a discussion of it. So if you're potentially a year from this transition, possibly maybe you have a discussion now. You bring in your agent, at that time, and then you kind of gently touch it into that situation. So that way you have some going forward. This is setting the seed and can help them to think this may be the right situation.
Yeah.
This will help me.
And I know my dad listens, so this is not a preamble, Dad, for me.
You sure?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
I should tell my mom too.
He's
Yeah,
still
not
he's
saying
still
either.
plowing everyone in the neighborhood's driveway, so I think he's safe.
Are you yelling at him then? Is that what you were yelling
No.
at?
All right.
This is great.
Yeah. Sign off?
Yeah.
All right. I'm Scott Lanahan.
I'm Joe Ubel.
Thanks for stopping by the garage.